Hey folks, her album Pieces of You was released in 1995. It's gone on to sell 10 million copies worldwide. We see her videos on MTV and VH1. Right now, currently, she's making her debut as a film actress on a film that's being shot in Kansas City. And tonight, she's here with us in New York City and in Virgin Megastores across the country to read selections from her new book, which is called A Night Without Armor. Please welcome singer, songwriter, actress, and author, a true Renaissance woman, Jewel.
Good evening.
You're embarrassing me now. I asked her back, like, did anybody show up?
I told her no. No, I said, we got a great crowd, and we've got a great crowd here and across the country with Virgin Megastores. So we're going to talk a little bit first about why you did a book of poetry. Wasn't it enough that you were a big singer-songwriter already? Why was it important to you to express yourself in poems?
First of all, I want to thank you guys for coming up, but if you talk, I would rather you left. So if you could please be quiet, it would help me out, because I'm really nervous. It's weird to read poetry in front of people.
Is this the first time you've done that?
Yeah, like this, yeah, basically.
So I think I can speak on behalf of Jewel and for anybody else who writes poetry. It's an honest, naked place to be, and to read it in public is brave. It's really brave. So we are very privileged. Let's talk about poetry, because some people would have difficulty understanding the distinction between lyrics and poetry. Is there a distinction?
For some reason, the poetry turns out very different than the song lyric. When I'm writing poetry, there's no time. When I write a song, there's always a meter, there's a guitar that's playing, and you usually have to rhyme words, and you have 3 minutes. But poems, there's no format and no rhyme scheme, and so I find that my lyrics are much more original, much more honest, and often my poetry is much more autobiographical.
I noticed in Pieces of You that alongside the lyrics, you actually included poetry. So you were determining, even then, I am a lyricist and a songwriter, but I'm also a poet. When did you start writing poetry?
I started writing poetry when I was about 6 years old. My mother had poetry workshops with us every Monday night.
Oh, cool.
And growing up, I began to really depend on poetry to help me understand the world.
Now, I'm sure there are people who have inspired you, who have influenced you, and maybe some people here who are being awakened to poetry might like to hear some of the poets who influenced and touched you.
I always liked the very bold writers like Bukowski, Anais Nin. I think Pablo Neruda for his political as well as love poems. There's so many, I wouldn't even know where to begin.
I was telling the crowd that when I went on your bus during the Lilith Fair tour, I was really inspired to see you with so many piles of books, heavy reading as well. And I said, you know, there's more to this woman than meets the eye. And I wondered, when you read books, does that inspire ideas that you then translate, or does your poetry all come from life?
I find often that especially my songwriting is influenced by reading. I listen to very, very little music. It wasn't a habit I was raised in, I suppose. So when I read Kant or something, it inspires me to write more lyrically driven songs like Who'll Save Your Soul. Or when I read Neruda, it makes me want to write painters or things like that. I find that it really affects and pushes my writing.
You know, one of the hard things to do once you're famous, and you are, is to observe. I think that part of being a poet is being a watcher and a listener. Is it harder for you now that people are watching you to kind of sit back and observe the world, or do you have really sophisticated disguises?
No, It's hard to hide my teeth. I was in a restaurant. Shut up, punk. I was in a restaurant. I don't actually often get that recognized, especially in California, because everybody's blonde. I sort of look like everybody else there. But I was in a restaurant in Missouri where I'm doing this movie, and I walked in, and they didn't have any room, at the tables, and so I left, and I went, wait a minute, I'm going to go back in there and go, don't you know who I am? I need a table. Afraid they wouldn't really care anyway, I'd give up. But I walked back in, and the host was talking to the manager, and he goes, how do you know it was Jewel? Did she have a snaggletooth? I was so mad. I digressed, sorry.
Well, that's okay. It was a good digression.
I can still watch people. I fly a lot. There's always people around. I find it just as easy, really. It's a little disconcerting to have people go, you look like shit today, when I'm in pajamas or something in public, but it's okay.
Silence is important to get...
I shouldn't cuss, sorry.
No, they just can't take pictures and they can't record, but I didn't hear any admonitions about cussing. No, nobody said anything about that. I think one of the things about poetry that's important is to get in touch with silence. And for me, it seems like where you grew up was a perfect landscape for you to address that silence for yourself. Do you think that that people need to understand that as an aspect of connecting with themselves, that you have to be quiet?
I remember my mom used to make me spend like 3 days alone in a cabin when I was 16, and it drove me up the wall because I wanted to go out with my friends. But I remember she really emphasized that I needed to learn to sit alone and to be quiet, because otherwise you never know yourself. And I do a lot of writing then. I think a lot of my best writing happens when I am quiet, because I don't know why we explore other universes without ever knowing the universe of our own emotions, or how we hope to know God by going through other people without going to God ourselves. And you can't do that unless you're in silence.
Has poetry helped you through some of the rougher patches in your life? Has it been an ally for you?
It's been both. Writing to me is just how I breathe. It's how I experience the world. It did help me through, the divorce and things like that. It also has been my greatest expression and gift to people I love poems,
Okay, well, we've talked about poetry a lot. I think now we should hear some of those poems. And Jewel actually saw that my book has little markers in it with the poems, so she wants to borrow mine. Here we go.
Okay.
That is my copy, though.
Okay, you're allowed to have it. It's not like I want to walk around with my own book, Do you guys want to hear love poems? Poems about growing up? Shut up over there. Typical. I don't know how to do this, you guys. All right. This is very well organized, by the way.
Thank you.
And they're all facing this way. Allow me to page through here. It's called As a Child, I Walked. As a child, I walked with noisy fingers along the hymnline of so many meadows back home. Thank you for interrupting the moment. I have a headache now. Can we just turn it up? Because I can't talk louder. I can only sing loud. As a child, I walked with noisy fingers along the hymnline of so many meadows back home. Green fabric stretched out, shy earth, shock of sky. I'd sit on logs like pulpits, listen to the sermon of sparrows, and find God in simplicity there amongst the dandelion and thorn. And you don't have to applause because it's embarrassing. Thank you. This is a poem I wrote when I was about young, anyway. Wild horse. I'd like to call you my wild horse and feed you silver sage. I'd like to paint my poems with desert-tongued clay across your back and ride you savagely as the sweet and southern wind through a green and wild Kentucky. I'd like to make you my secret sun, blazing dark and red in the orchards, and I would steal away to watch the way your silver belly bends and bows beneath me. I'd make you my wings in the foothills of Montana, the lover in the oceans of the world. I'd make you my calico children and scatter you across the green memories of home. I'd be your hungry valley and sow you golden fields of wheat in my womb.
Horses are important to you. I mean, you've used that metaphor because it's been a big part of your life, hasn't it?
Yeah, I grew up with horses. It's a freedom. It gives you wings. It gives you flight.
I read somewhere that if you had a chance, you'd take your horse Jazz on the road.
Yeah, I would have liked to. Yeah, it's hard on a horse.
Hard in person.
He got killed, too, by the way.
No.
Yeah, he got hit by a drunk driver.
Oh, so trust me, I brought up that. I'm sorry.
No, I don't mind.
Okay, Jules' upset now. Maybe another poem. Maybe a happier one.
A happier poem. It's called Sunbathing. I was in Washington, D.C. It was my first year of touring. I was really anemic and very pale, and I was trying to catch some rays on the roof by this pool. Sunbathing. I read a book, and the man thinks I cannot see the wrinkled posture of his son as he is nudged. He thinks I cannot sense the 4 eyes upon my flesh as the father tries to bond with his teenage boy by ogling my breasts.
I don't know if I want to talk about that. Have there been poems that you have written that have taught you something that you didn't know about yourself?
I think that's the beauty of writing. It's why I've needed writing, is because through it I come to know. When I'm confused at night, I sit down and I learn more. Or even when I'm not confused, if you just pick up your pen, you learn more about yourself and the world. And to me, that's always been amazing. I think that creativity is some sort of universal energy, and you can just tap into it and pull things in that you have no right to know at your age or with your experience. You know? Father of a deaf girl. Every time her hands began to stutter, he became enraged. She threw these fits sometimes, and he never took the time to understand what they meant. Her words were wasted on him, her hands useless birds caged by their quietness, and he would immobilize them, tying her wrists together so they'd jump like awkward fish, gasping at the shock of air. Unheard, they'd dance like that for hours, her eyes full of silent desperation on the other side of the closet door. He never even knew what they were saying. I want to fly from here. I want to fly from here. I want to fly from here.
Wow. There are a lot of questions that we have collected, so maybe while I'm getting those handed to me, I'd ask you to read one more. And I just want the audience to know, we had them sorted out, so if there was any duplicity, that they were sorted out. But I'm told that there's so many good questions.
Oh, good.
So you read us one more, and someone will find those questions.
Okay. I say to you, idols. I say to you, idols of carefully studied disillusionment, and you worshippers who find beauty in only fallen things, that the greatest grace we can aspire to is the strength to see the wounded, to walk with the forgotten, and pull ourselves from the screaming blood of our losses to fight on, undaunted, all the more.
Ooh. You know, that leads into a great question that we have here from Suzanne, who lives in New Haven. And she asks you, Jewel, how important do you think it is to be seen as a good person with high moral standards, given that you are a role model to so many young girls?
It's important to me, just as a person. I don't want to look back on my life and realize that I've been so foolish as to become caught up with the superfluous. I don't really feel like my being successful is enough. I don't feel satisfied. And it's not because I want more success, it's because I don't want people to go through some of the things I've gone through or worse. I don't think that anybody's successful until we kind of are as a group. So I find it very important, personally, as a human, as well as the fact that I know we all live our lives in front of each other's, and one suicide is made up of 1,000 little sorrows, and people's lives are saved by common kindness. And we need to afford each other that instead of being petty every day, as I often am as well.
It's about consciousness.
Yeah.
We have a question here from Don Verhoeven from the Netherlands. I'm not from here either, he says. Jewel, you seem to be open for both pleasure and pain, often interpreted as innocence. What, in your estimation, is the beauty of pain?
Not being guarded. Nothing kills you, hardly. Emotional. I think that we should be bold in our living. The more I learn as a person, the less I open myself up to be hurt. I find that when I am hurt, it's usually because I've placed myself in an unsafe situation. But I like love too much, and I enjoy it too much to close myself. And I don't enjoy being calculated, and so I'd rather be innocent, because it needs to be maintained after all.
Right now we're going to take a question, because I told you that people in Virgin Megastores all across the country are listening. We're going to take a question from Orlando. Hello, Orlando.
Hello. This is Mike from Orlando, and my question is, how are you planning on balancing the poetry with your musical career?
I don't think it should be too hard. I feel really lucky that my music career allowed me to put out a book of poetry. And I'll put it out, and I'll do a record after this. I personally feel kind of bored if I'm just doing one thing creatively, so it should be pretty smooth, I hope, if it goes well.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
We have another question here from our New York audience. Audre Lorde wrote an essay. Isn't that Andre Lorde? Anyway, titled Poetry is Not a Luxury, where she wrote, it is Audre, where she wrote about the necessity of poetry to our lives. Do you think poetry is necessary to our lives, and how can we make poetry more accessible?
I think poetry is very essential, because in school I was taught mathematics and how to memorize things and how to be worried if I was fitting in. That I wasn't taught how to be human. I wasn't taught how to have relationships. I wasn't taught how to handle depression. And I wasn't taught how to make my dreams possible in certain ways. And I find that a lot of adults aren't too available to helping you with those things. I don't think a lot of us have been helped with those things in general, and I find poetry to be very helpful, because it's a history not only of the physical account of things, it's a history of the soul's evolution. And it teaches us what we admire and what we really don't. And I think that's why it's important.
That was a question from Rachel, and now we're taking a question from San Francisco. Hello, San Francisco.
Hi, Joel. It's Jeremy from San Francisco. My question is there a special meaning to the title of your book?
A Knight Without Armor. Yeah. Poetry is very revealing. And I think that it's easy to be clever. It's easy to be facetious and sarcastic. I find myself doing it a lot. But I don't think it helps things particularly. All it does is make me safe. It's an armor. And I want to be sincere. You know, I want to help people. And I want to help myself. And my writing has always been very honest. And in putting it out, I knew I was revealing a lot about myself and about what I see in the world. And that's why I call it A Knight Without Armor, because it's me willing to be revealed.
She took off that heavy plate and just said, "Here I am." Mm-hmm. Here's a question from Cheryl, who's from Montreal, Quebec. Where did you find the source for Bukowski's widow? Experiences? Personal?
I got to meet Bukowski's widow at a party. I didn't know who it was. I had a friend who was one of Bukowski's best friends, and introduced this red-headed woman to me and said, "Would you sing her Painters?" So I sat down in the bed, got out my guitar, and I sang her Painters, and she started sobbing about a verse through it. And I felt a little embarrassed, like, God, what is happening? And why is this woman sobbing? And I found that it was Bukowski's widow, and it just stuck with me, and I wrote the poem after that.
And now we're going to Los Angeles. Hello, Los Angeles.
Hi, Jewel. This is David in L.A. Who are some of your favorite poets?
Neruda, Yeats, Shakespeare, Bukowski. Annie Dillard, I think, is good. Neruda, yeah, a lot of them.
So across time, not just this century.
Yeah, I like things that express. I mean, I like Bukowski's way of speaking, and I appreciate it for some reason. I don't find it too misogynistic. I find it more like a very sensitive guy trying to put on a good act in a lot of ways. And I just learned from it. I don't really tend to judge it. It's good.
Maybe you saw past Bukowski's armor.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people did.
We have a question here from Jonathan in Manhattan. Dear Jewel, what direction would you most like to see the current music scene go in, and which artists do you feel most represent that direction today?
I don't know. The thing I love about music is it speaks to everybody. Everybody's allowed to have what touches them. Meatloaf touches people. I touch people. Celine Dion touches people. I'd hate to pretend to know where the direction of music is going. I sure don't know. I mean, it makes me nervous. I have no idea if what I do next people will like or not. I hope it has more to do with trend, less to do with trend and more to do with sincerity, in my case, I hope.
We're winging back to San Francisco. Hello, San Francisco.
Hi, Jewel. My name's Sonia. I was wondering if there were any poems in the collection that stand out to you or have a special meaning.
I never wrote about home before until I did the book. I was tired of being portrayed in the press as somebody that was raised on a commune by wolves in igloos in Alaska. And I wanted to write about the spirituality that I found in nature. And how, without being raised in a place that was without the tangles of popular culture, I think it's because of that that I've been able to retain who I am in popular culture and in fame today. I know what's important in life, and it isn't fame. So I feel thankful for that. And so I think the poems I wrote about growing up, about my brothers, about milking the cow, and those things are sort of close to my heart.
Thank you, San Francisco. We have another question from Maggie in New Jersey. This is very appropriate. What do you find more nerve-wracking, reading poetry or singing?
Reading poetry. I'm new at it, and I'm afraid people will talk. And singing, you can always sing louder or, I don't know, sing prettier. But you can't reading poetry.
Now I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you if you want to read another poem.
Okay. I read one about home, if I find one. About my brother. Hold on, hold on, hold on.
Nobody's going anywhere.
Oh, there it is. It's called Goodness, a poem for Shane, my older brother. My older brother Shane has always been kind and would shoulder the lion's share of our many chores. Come morning, it was his voice which would rush my consciousness into the cold reality of the bedroom we shared. It were his hands which would numbly feel for coal in the steel-black dawn to start a fire, and his long fingers which would grasp the warm pink teats of the milk cow in the frozen cold, so that I could siphon off the cream and make butter before school. He broke up fights between Otsley and me, absorbing the kicks and screams and hollers of rebuttal without anger. He was our smiling Buddha, a kind, constant force in a house that was otherwise capricious. I recently went to the hospital to see his fourth child, a girl being born. I think I am still a child, scattering myself thin, but as I watched my brother with his tiny new baby and his 3 boys coming up to take a peek at their new sister, I thought to myself, he must be a particular kind of being, a breed of person that is made simply and perfectly to love.
Have you had feedback from your brothers and your family about the poems that you've written? Because that one is particularly poignant, obviously.
It's a typical reaction of my older brother. He goes, I wasn't that nice, I swear. Ever humble, it makes me sick.
I think we have San Francisco standing by. Hello, San Francisco.
Hello.
Hello. I can read you something in the meantime.
Hello. Pink Floyd.
I have a question here in the meantime from Kimberly, who lives in San Diego, who says, how much credit do you give Steve Poltz in helping you or inspiring your songwriting? I used to watch you and the Rugburns in San Diego.
Steve Poltz I met when I was 18 working in a coffee shop as a coffee shop kid. And he had a gig there, and I'd never played my own songs in front of people in my life. And I said, I sing? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, can I get up and sing with you? He's like, oh, God. But he ended up really helping me. He shared his gigs with me. He taught me the F chord and bar chords and made me listen to the Beatles and Big Star and things I'd never heard in my life. He always called me Ellie Mae Clampett because I was like, what's that? Pa? He's great. He's a great songwriter. He has an album out called One Left Shoe. So everybody should go buy it. I'm singing on his album, and there's a couple songs we wrote together. And he wrote You're Meant for Me with me.
We're going back to Los Angeles now. Hello, Los Angeles. That was some nice That is static from Los Angeles, all the way from Los Angeles. Hello?
Should I read another one?
You know, we'll just stick here with some of these questions till the people in LA get it sorted out. This is from Unsigned, but the question is, do you find it hard to maintain your heart and poise in the face of cynicism and skepticism? Do you ever feel discouraged, and what do you do when you need to renew yourself spiritually?
It's a big question. Yeah, I find it hard sometimes, but I feel committed to it, just because it's the only way I feel happy. I don't find cynicism to be smarter, it's just kind of safer. I don't really like playing it safe, I guess. In the business, it's been hard. I've been afraid that I'd have to give up who I was and what I believed in so that I could be popular. But I'm very glad to say that it isn't true. There are great people that work with me, and I've always been able to make my career look like me, or not do it. I think the hard part is really knowing who you are, and you have to spend a lot of time figuring that out before you go out into my profession. There have been times in my life when I thought that somehow maybe original sin was right, and we are born with original sin. And I might be depraved or something, but I don't believe in it. I think that we are divine by nature. And I think we have an original innocence, an original information that is in us that we can get back to at any time. I think that we have to maintain ourselves, and we have to be careful with ourselves, and not place ourselves in places that are hurtful to us, that disillusion us, which is actually my second record I'm going to put out is sort of an antidote to all of that. We should read more fairy tales. Our lives should be filled with more magic, because reality is our perception of it, and we should, choose very consciously what we want our lives to be. So I have to go. Nature helps me a lot. I go outside just because that's how I was raised. I meditate a lot or pray a lot, and try and surround myself with people that have like minds, so that when I spin into my dark spirals, which I'm apt to do at times, they can sort of give me a reality dose.
A reality dose. Here's one from Orlando right now. Hello, Orlando.
Hi, Jewel. This is Joel from Orlando.
Hi.
I was wondering, I know you're doing a lot of promoting with the book right now, but I also understand you're doing a movie with Ang Lee, and I was wondering, is it going to conflict with the promoting of both?
Hell no, Dre. I schedule them separate. It can be done. Not too hard.
We're heading back to Los Angeles. Hello, Los Angeles.
Hello. This is Wade. I wanted to know, I think that songs are very personal, but somehow poems seem even more naked. How difficult was it for you, being known as a singer-songwriter, to open yourself to whatever criticisms from within and without that would arise from making such a move? And did you find it freeing having done so?
I did find it freeing. I sort of have this overwhelming desire to communicate to people, and the more honest I can be, the less hidden I feel, which is good for me. I did worry a little bit when I put the book out because I knew that as a pop star, I'd be more scrutinized by the press. But then I decided, damn the press, people count more. And my own creative journey counts more. And I want people to be touched. And the only way that happens is when you're blatantly honest. So I decided to go for it. And I have no idea what'll happen. But I like the book. I'm proud. So I guess that's all that counts.
We're going to take one more question from San Francisco, then one more question from me, and then we're going to ask Jewel to decide on a closing poem before she leaves.
Okay.
Oh, but we're going to do something from New York first. Happy birthday, Jewel, in 4 days.
Thank you.
And what does the phrase bitten mouth mean? Joe wants to know that. Joe?
Joe, you don't know? How old are you? I don't know what it means. It's a poem, darn it. I don't have to explain.
I'll ask you one more that Justin from New York says, people are talking about Jewel. What would mean the most to you for them to be saying?
Oh, I don't know. I'm a kid still, I'm learning. I don't claim to have any answers yet. I think I'm sort of a human in training. And I know I'm in the public now, and I just sort of hope to remain committed to evolving in front of people and not trying to cover up the awkwardness of what I am, or what I'm groping with, or the inconsistency, or the rawness, so that I can look more polished to the people. And I don't know where that'll carry me. It might carry me a lot of places.
We're going to have one closing question from San Francisco. Hello, San Francisco.
Hi, Jewel. My name's Aurora, and I just want to tell you happy birthday first.
Thank you.
As a fan, can we expect another poetry book to follow in the future?
Yeah. I don't know when, but I always write poetry every day, so I was thinking about putting out just a book of love poems next. There's a second book coming out, too, after this. It'll be more short stories and prose and me talking on topics.
I think that people need to know, and I don't know whether you agree with this, but it's not important to write poetry because you want to publish a book necessarily.
Yeah.
It's important to write poetry because it's a way of connecting with yourself, right?
Yeah, for me, poetry, I never thought I was even a writer or a songwriter. I wrote very personally, it was like a diary. And it's been my best friend, my closest companion. I'm in love with my pen. And to me, it's weird, that people think I'm a poet now, or hearing it said to me is kind of like, even songwriting's that way. I think it's just important personally for people to write poems. And when you judge your writing is when it dies. You can't judge your babies.
Well, now, as you go through there and find out the closing poem that you'd like to read, I just remind everyone out here that A Night Without Armor is also on CD and audio cassette. So if you're the kind of person who likes to listen as opposed to read, that you can get it that way too. And I just want to thank everyone for being here and being a really fantastic audience in the Virgin Megastore here in New York City and the Virgin Megastores across the country. These are fantastic questions.
Yeah.
Really fantastic questions. So thanks a lot for being so bright.